Hi, my name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore, and welcome back to my bedroom. Today's episode is all about me indulging your curiosities. I am answering all of your guys' questions. I've spent the last month or so collecting a list of the most frequently asked questions I get on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, on Twitter sometimes too, because there are a lot that are repeated, a lot of things that you guys seem to be really curious about. And I'm going to be answering all of those common questions today. I also put up a question box on my Instagram 2 days ago, so I'm going to be answering some questions from there as well at the end. We'll see how many I get to, depending how much time we have left. If you want to be able to ask me questions for future episodes, because I regularly do question boxes for the podcast episodes, make sure you're following me on Instagram at Lucy Huxley X. And without further ado, let's jump right into the questions. So, in no particular order, we're going to start off with, do you see female clients? No, I don't. I am straight, so I only see men. I mentioned this on my Instagram a while ago, and I got a few questions about it because people were like, well, if you only see men because you're straight, does that mean you only see men that you're attracted to if it's about attraction? And no, I see all sorts of men. I don't discriminate based on looks or anything like that. It's not about attraction for me. But for me, there is a base level with men that I'm always attracted to. Even if I'm not enjoying the booking, I can at least imagine that they're another man, if that makes sense. Whereas with women, I don't have any sort of that base attraction. I consider myself like probably the straightest person I know. All of my friends are at least a little bit bi. I think most people are a little bit bi. But for me, there's just zero attraction to women. And I also have no experience with women. I experimented a little bit when I was like 20 years old and I first moved to Berlin. I tried being with women because I wanted to know for sure if I liked it or not. And I realized I didn't like it. So I'm also not an expert in bed with women. I would never feel comfortable asking a woman to pay for my time because I don't know what I'm doing. And for this reason, I also don't see couples. I get a few inquiries from time to time from couples who want to see me for a threesome. And that's not something I offer unless they're interested in mostly just the two women playing with the guy and not really having any girl on girl action. Next question. Are my boobs real? Yes, they are. I was gifted by genetics. Thank you, Mom. I've never had any sort of plastic surgery or cosmetic procedures done. And if I did, I think I would be pretty open about that on social media. Do you pay taxes? Yes, I do pay taxes. The German government would not let me get away without paying taxes to them. So, because sex work is quite unique, there's a bit of a different filing system for me than for other freelancers. I've always been a freelancer in the various jobs I've done since I moved to Germany. And normally I would write invoices to all of my clients. And then at the end of the year, when I do my taxes, I would submit all of those invoices as proof of my income. I do not write invoices to my clients as a sex worker because for invoices, you need to have personal details of the client, such as their full name and address. And you also need to give your client your personal details, including your legal address. Those details are usually not exchanged between a sex worker and their client. I will usually know my client's full legal name, but I won't know their address. They don't know my legal name. I certainly don't want them knowing my address. So invoices are not used. And the German government understands this. They understand that sex workers are not going around writing invoices for all of their clients. So they allow us to basically keep a logbook of the money we make. So every time we have a booking, we write down information like the date of the booking, how long it was for, and how much money we made. Then we can either deposit the cash into our bank account or just use it as cash. And at the end of the year, when we do our taxes, we use that logbook to report all of the income that we make. And when I mentioned this on TikTok, people were like, oh, like the German government basically lets you self-report your income. That's crazy. You could just lie about it. And yeah, it's obviously possible to lie, but the German government can also audit you at any time. They can look at your bank statements to confirm that your reported income matches up with what's in your bank account and with the money that you're spending. And they can also request access to things like your PayPal accounts and other things like that. And also, I'm an immigrant here on a limited working visa. And every time I go to renew my visa, I have to prove that I have a good amount of income. The better my income is, essentially, when I go to renew my visa, the more likely they are to give me a visa extension and to give me an extension for longer. So it's in my best interest to show the government all of the money that I'm making. And I pay around like 35% taxes to the German government right now. Have you ever caught feelings for a client, or would you date a client? No, I have not caught feelings, and I can't imagine that ever happening. If you listened to my last episode, you know that I have a boyfriend and I am very much in love, and we are certainly very emotionally monogamous. But aside from that, even when I was doing this work while I was single, I am quite good at compartmentalizing some things. If I set my mind to this is a client and not someone I can develop a relationship with, I'm pretty good at sticking to that. Also, when I'm with clients, the way I am is quite different to how I am when I date in my personal life. And I don't mean that I'm acting like somebody different. That's too tiring to do. I am authentically myself when I'm with my clients. But when I'm with my clients, my focus is on providing them with the best service that I can and on making them happy. Whereas when I'm dating in my personal life, my focus is on how is this person making me feel and what are they providing for me? So it's a completely different mindset approach to me. And I can't imagine switching between those mindsets to go well for either party. If I went from being someone's escort and always doing my best to make sure that they're happy, not showing up complaining about other things, always having in mind what I can do to give them the best service possible, and switching into being, what are you doing for me? What are you doing to make me happy? That's going to be a different experience for them, right? And also a different experience for me. So I can't imagine that ever happening to me. But I have heard stories of sex workers developing feelings for their clients and even having relationships with their clients. It certainly does happen. Okay, do I turn down ugly clients, or how do I deal with ugly clients? This is not something I think about so much because, as I mentioned, looks really play no part in whether I accept clients or not and how I treat them. I do know what my clients look like before I meet them. I do need to see a photo of them before our meeting so that I know who I'm meeting, just so I know what to expect. And if we're meeting in a public place, I know who to look out for, and also for my own safety. But for me, the way they look is really irrelevant. For me, the most important thing for actually enjoying a booking is the client's personality and how they treat me. If we get along personality wise and if they're respectful to me, that's going to make it an amazing booking. And how they look is really simply irrelevant to me. They could be like the hottest guy in the world, but if the conversation is difficult and slow, and if they're not being respectful to me, and if I don't enjoy spending time with them, then I would much rather go for a client who is more quote unquote ugly and who actually treats me well and who I enjoy spending time with. How do I take care of my sexual health regarding STIs? There's a couple questions surrounding this. So, first of all, I use condoms for everything. I do not offer bare services to any clients under any circumstances. So, penetrative sex is always with condoms, and blowjobs are also always with condoms. So I am what is referred to as like a high-end girlfriend experience escort, and a lot of high-end girlfriend experience escorts offer blowjobs without condoms. And I have considered doing this because it is quite normal in the industry. However, I did once get chlamydia in my throat from giving somebody an unprotected blowjob, because that is possible. And this is why this is a pro tip. If you are someone who gives oral sex to other people, when you go and get an STI test, you need to ask for a throat swab, because there are some STIs, including chlamydia, where the infection can occur only in your throat and it won't spread to other places. So you need to get your throat specifically swabbed in order to test for that. So STI transmission is very possible with blowjobs, especially. Blowjobs have a higher risk of STI transmission than cunnilingus. So that is why I always use condoms for blowjobs. And of course, I get tested for STIs regularly. The recommendation by my doctor, as well as by the German government, is that sex workers get tested for STIs every 3 months. I go at least every 3 months. Often I go more often, especially if I have a porn shoot coming up or something like that. I would say on average, I get tested every 2 months. And it's always a full panel, including urine, blood, throat swab, and vaginal swab. Because I am so strict about using protection with clients, this is something I never make an exception for. And because I get tested regularly, I don't have anxiety or worry about STIs. And everyone should be getting tested for STIs regularly. Even if you are not a sex worker, you should be getting tested regularly. I really encourage you to get tested at least every 6 months if you are sexually active with multiple partners. Do I care if my clients are married or not? So the basic answer to this is no. Most of the time, I don't know my client's relationship status, right? If they don't bring it up, I'm not going to ask them. It's not appropriate for me to ask about that. But I am aware that a good percentage of my clients are married, but their personal relationships and their personal agreements that they have with their significant others are simply not my business. If they are choosing to break the vow that they made to their significant other, that is their choice and has nothing to do with me. They have decided to seek me out and seek out my services. It's not like I'm going after married men trying to make them cheat on their wives. They're coming to me of their own free will, and I am providing my service to them as a professional. I've also actually had some clients who are married talk to me about how they have an open relationship with their wives, or how their wives allow them to see escorts on the side. Do I orgasm during bookings? So I very often do orgasm during bookings. It depends on a few things. Thankfully, I'm blessed with the ability to orgasm quite easily. It can happen quite quickly. I don't always need something like really special done to me. So if a client is making an effort to give me pleasure, I will often orgasm, which doesn't always happen. A lot of times clients are just focused on their own pleasure, and that's fine as well. But I can also orgasm just from penetrative sex. So sometimes that will happen too. Some clients who are very invested in my pleasure will ask me what I like and ask me to direct them on how they can give me an orgasm, because that gets them off. And another common question I get related to that is if I ever fake orgasms during sessions. I do very occasionally. The only time which I'll fake an orgasm is when we're having penetrative sex and I don't feel like an orgasm is going to come naturally to me, but I feel like an orgasm will help my client orgasm. If I feel like it's gonna bring him more pleasure or help him finish, then I will perform an orgasm in that case. That's the only time I really do it. How do I stay safe during bookings? So, this is a complex question, and this is also a question that I am not willing to answer publicly. And this is for two reasons. One reason is that if I were to share my safety protocols publicly, that means that people who want to harm me would have the tools to get around my safety protocols, right? If someone knows exactly the steps I take in order to stay safe, then they can circumvent those if they have bad intentions. The other reason I don't share my safety protocols is because I often get asked this question by other sex workers or brand new sex workers who are looking for advice about how to stay safe. And I am really not comfortable being responsible for the safety of other sex workers. And I am not comfortable being a mentor for this type of work in any capacity, really, which I'm going to get into a bit more in a later question. I will say one of the main things I do to stay safe is that I always meet clients in hotels. I do out calls to hotels only. And meeting in a hotel makes things a lot safer than meeting in a client's private apartment. If I'm in a private apartment, I don't know the layout. I don't know what might be hidden in the apartment. I don't know how the lock system on the door works. If it's not in a central area, it might be difficult for me to get a cab when I leave. There's a lot more risks associated with being in a private space. When I'm in a hotel, if something were to go wrong in a booking, all I would have to do was go out of the door of the hotel room, and I would be in a public space that has other people around, that has staff that are there to help me, that has security cameras. And hotels also have a register of all guests that are staying there. So that alone does increase my safety and is why I only ever meet clients in hotels. Are you fluent in German? Ja, ich spreche Deutsch. Ich lerne jetzt für mein B1 Prüfung. I'll stop now because I know that most of my listeners do not speak German. I don't consider myself fluent in German at all. I'm studying now for my B1 test. B1 is basically intermediate level. My German has definitely improved a lot over the last few months, and I can easily have basic conversations. I can't have conversations about abstract topics and philosophy and things like that. But yeah, I can talk about most things in German. I do primarily see clients in English. I have only had a booking in German once, and it was because it was a client who didn't speak very much English. And I feel like the reason I was able to get through that booking all in German was because German was also his second language. It is much easier for me to have a conversation in German with other people who are not native German speakers because non-native German speakers usually speak slower. And a lot of the times when I'm talking with native German speakers, I need to ask them to slow down because the rate at which they speak naturally is really too much for me. But yeah, other than that, all of my bookings are in English and it hasn't been a problem for me. I don't speak German. Berlin is a very international city. There's lots of immigrants here who don't speak German or who speak very poor German. And also, a major portion of my clients are people who are traveling to Berlin. They're like businessmen or tourists who are just visiting Berlin, so they're not German either. What will you do when you age out of this industry? I get this question a lot, and I find it interesting that people assume that this industry has an age limit, that people assume that men only want to book sex workers who are under the age of 30. And I can understand why people have this assumption, right? Because society values younger women so much more than they value older women. And because it is so common for older men to have desire for younger women. However, you can be a successful sex worker into your 70s if you want to. There is a market out there for everybody. There are men who are into every single type of woman. There are plenty of older men who don't want to book a 20-year-old. They want to book someone who has maybe a similar amount of life experience as they do, who they can have more connective and insightful conversations with. They want to book someone that they won't feel weird being seen out in public, right? A 70-year-old guy with a 20-year-old escort out for dinner, people are going to probably know what's going on. He might feel more comfortable with someone who's in their 50s, where it feels a little bit more natural. And also, MILFs is a massive porn category. Men love MILFs. So there definitely is a market for sex workers of all ages. I know sex workers in Berlin who are in their 40s and 50s who are killing it. So I'm not worried about aging out of this industry. I do, however, know that I'm not going to be in this industry forever simply because of my personality. I spoke about this in episode 1 of my podcast, but I'm basically the type of person who changes careers like every 2 years. And I have since I started working, basically. I've had many different careers because every 2 years I go through a crisis of being like, oh my God, I don't want to do my current job anymore. What am I going to do with my life? So I do expect that to happen. I hope it won't happen because it is very stressful to go through that crisis and have to refigure out what I'm doing with my life. But I've also learned to accept that about myself and learn to trust myself because every time I go through this, I always end up okay on the other side of things. But also, if you've listened to my podcast, you know that I've done lots of different types of sex work. I've been in and out of the industry in various roles for 8 years. So I imagine that I will stay involved in the sex industry in some way for a long time. But who knows what the future will hold? Because I know myself, because I know that I change my mind every few years. I don't put pressure on myself to make long-term plans. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't have a 10-year plan because I don't know what I'm going to want in 5 years. And I just know that about myself. I know that what's best for me is to go with the flow and not really plan my life more than 6 months ahead. What is your favorite sex position? I am really a fan of missionary. I just love eye contact during sex. Missionary also allows for great hand use. I can put my hands on the guy, they can put their hands on my boobs. There's so many possibilities and also like slight variations of missionary that can be great, like with my legs up over their shoulders. It's really just my favorite. I would say my second favorite is doggy. I do love that also, but missionary is a classic for a reason. I do think it's amazing and it is underrated. Does your family know what you do? Yes, my immediate family knows what I do, and they are all cool about it. I am very thankful to have a very supportive and liberal and open minded family. The person I'm closest with in my family is my mom, and she has always known about my different escapades in sex work. And there have been times when I've told her I'm doing new things. So I'm starting escorting or I'm starting this, where she has been worried simply out of concern for my safety. But she has always been very willing to listen to me and has always been very open minded. So she'll often listen to me and take a few days to think about it. And then we'll talk about it some more. And she always says, as long as you're safe and as long as you're happy, that's what matters to me. So she is super supportive and she also listens to my podcast. All right. The last question on my list of frequently asked questions is I want to be an escort or I am an escort. Can you give me advice? The answer to this for me right now is always no. I am not a mentor for this type of work, and I will not be a mentor for this type of work. I am new to this industry. I have been doing this type of escorting for less than a year. So I am not an expert. And if you are looking for mentorship and advice in this industry, it's really important that you have discernment on who you are taking advice from. You should not be taking advice from people who have less than 1 year of experience in this industry. I don't feel I have enough knowledge to be a mentor, and I also just personally don't have a desire to be a mentor. That's like a separate job from what I already do, right? And I don't want to be responsible for other people getting into this industry and other people having issues in this industry. This is a really difficult industry to work in, and it's really not for everybody. And my hot take, which I think some people are going to think is very harsh, but this is my honest opinion, is that if you don't have the resourcefulness to look for a proper mentor and the resourcefulness to look for information online about how to do this work well and how to do it safely, because there is a lot of information available online and it's not hard to find. If you don't have the resourcefulness and the drive to look for it yourself, and instead you're just asking me in my comments because I showed up on your TikTok for you page, then you might not have what it takes to succeed in this industry. You have to be very resourceful, driven, and smart about who you listen to in this industry. I also don't feel comfortable offering advice publicly on social media because I really don't think social media is the place to offer advice about this type of work. I don't want anyone thinking that they know how to do this work properly or that they know how to do this work safely just because they watched a 2-minute video on TikTok of mine. It's so much more complex than that. And deciding if you want to get into this industry and what things you want to do in this industry, how you want to pivot your career, maybe if you're already in this industry, is a very serious topic that requires a lot more than a social media post. I have considered doing a longer podcast episode on it, mostly warning people about the negatives of this industry if they are considering getting into it. But at this point, I am not comfortable offering any sort of mentorship or advice because, like I said, I do not feel I have enough experience to be doing that at this point. I will say that if you are already escorting and you are looking for advice about how to raise your prices or how to offer better services, I recommend Isabel Fox on YouTube. She was an escort for 10 years and now she offers mentoring. And she offers some incredible advice for free on YouTube and also has courses, and you can book one on one calls with her as well. Okay, and that ends the frequently asked questions portion of today's episode. So now I'm going to get into some of the questions that you guys asked me on Instagram a couple days ago. There were some really good ones that I'm excited to answer. What about your line of work would surprise people? One of the things that I found most surprising when I started doing this work is that most of my bookings are during the week, during the day. When I started, I assumed that most of my bookings would be in the evenings or on the weekend, but the majority of my bookings happen during 9 to 5 work hours, which is great for me because that leaves my evenings and weekends to be social with my friends who have 9 to 5s. Of course, I still regularly get evening and weekend bookings, but the majority of them are during the day. And this is because most men don't want to have to explain to their friends, their coworkers, or even their wives where they've been for 3 hours on a Tuesday evening. They'd rather keep it within work hours or on a lunch break so that it's more discreet. As a sex worker, what kind of impact has that had, good or bad, on your mental health and confidence? I actually think that it hasn't had a massive impact on my mental health and confidence. I'm trying to think back to sex work in general because I've been doing various forms of sex work on and off for 8 years. Very glad that I waited until now to do escorting because escorting requires a lot of confidence and good mental health and good boundaries in order to not have it affect your mental health negatively. I think if I had started escorting when I was younger, I would have ended up in some sticky situations. I think it would have affected my mental health negatively. But now I am much more confident. I have very strong boundaries and much stronger mental health. So I don't experience any negative effects from it. It does definitely boost my confidence in some ways to have so many men desire me and be paying so much for my time. So that can be a really nice boost sometimes, but it's really not the source of my confidence, which is important. So, yeah, overall, I would say it's a tribute to how good my mental health is now that it doesn't affect me so much. My mental health has not always been good. I used to really struggle with PTSD and depression. And I am doing so amazing now compared to that. And I have an amazing therapist. So, yeah, I feel great about it in general. If you could choose the age of all of your clients, would you prefer older or younger men? So, obviously, everyone is different. You know, there's going to be exceptions within every age bracket, but I would choose older men. And that is for one reason. Older men know what they want. And there is nothing I love more in a man than a man who knows what he wants. I find with younger clients, I have to take a lot more initiative and lead them more because they're less experienced and they're not sure what they want out of a booking, or maybe they're too timid to be forward with their desires and what they want us to do with our time together. Whereas older men more frequently will be more forward about saying what they want and planning what they want to do with me. And I really appreciate it when someone plans things, when they make an itinerary, when they tell me what they want. That not only makes my job easier, but it means I can relax and enjoy myself and spend more of my mental energy giving you a good time as opposed to stressing out about how to guide you and what we're going to do. As I said, there are, of course, exceptions to this. I have younger clients that I really love. But yeah, overall, that's the main reason that I prefer older clients versus younger ones. Did you learn new sexual skills when you became an in person sex worker, or did you go with the flow? I wouldn't say I learned any new sexual skills before I started. I felt very confident in my sexual skills. I have a very wide range of sexual experiences, which you'll know, especially if you listened to my podcast episode about kink and BDSM. So I didn't feel like I had to learn anything to prepare. The one thing I have really gotten better at since I started doing sex work is putting condoms on penises. Because before in my personal life, I would usually just hand the man the condom or they would do it themselves. I was not really interested in doing that step for them. I was like, you can put a condom on yourself. But as a sex worker, it's important for me to A, use my own condoms and B, put them on the client myself for safety reasons. So I've gotten a lot better at doing it myself. I do think there is still room to improve. I want to learn how to put it on with my mouth. I haven't learned how to do that yet. But It's important for me to use the condoms that I bring for two reasons. One is that it is possible for clients to tamper with their own condoms before they use them. For example, they could poke the package with a needle, so the condom would not be effective. So, for safety, I use my own supply of condoms. And also, because I'm having sex with condoms often, certain condoms are really irritating to my vagina. So, I have found a brand of condoms that work best for me. I use the brand Skin. They're latex-free condoms, and I find them to be really not irritating for me, and they enable me to work more. They just work better for my body. So I will bring a variety of sizes of Skin condoms to each booking and use those, and I put them on the client myself. And the reason I also put them on the client is because there is a correct way and an incorrect way to put condoms on. I had a TikTok video about this go viral this summer, so some of you might have seen that. But essentially, when you put a condom on, if you put it on the wrong way first, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this with just talking and no visual presentation. If you put it on the wrong side and you try to roll it down and you realize, oh, it's upside down, and then you flip it over and you're like, okay, it's good now, and you roll it down. Now the part of the condom that's on the outside has touched the head of the penis, which probably has pre-cum and fluid already on it. And now the condom is no longer an effective barrier because the penis's fluid is already on the outside of the condom. So it's very common for clients to make that mistake, especially if they're nervous about putting it on. So I always put the condom on. I make that mistake sometimes, but if I do make that mistake, I throw out the condom and get a new one instead of flipping it over. And you should also always pinch the tip when you roll it down. The tip is just that little reservoir at the end of the condom where the cum goes into. And you pinch the tip to make sure there's no air trapped in it, because if there's air trapped in that reservoir, it's more likely to break. In an ideal society where capitalism and patriarchy does not exist, do you think sex work would? Would people want to do it and buy it? My answer to this is 100% yes, because sex work predates both patriarchy and capitalism. Sex work is called the oldest profession for a reason. Humans have been trading sex for resources before we even became Homo sapiens. Like our evolutionary ancestors were trading sex for resources, for safety, for other things. So, because it predates both patriarchy and capitalism, I expect that it will also postdate patriarchy and capitalism if we ever end up escaping those things. And I have mentioned this on social media before and gotten some pushback from people saying that gynecology is actually the oldest profession, which I think is also important to recognize that gynecology is the reason why we were able to start forming the civilizations that we have today and start building cities. The agricultural revolution is commonly cited as the reason why humans were able to see great population increases, but the actual root of why we were able to have population increases is gynecology. It was women in communities learning how to aid other women in delivering babies safely. It's hard to tell for sure exactly when trading sex for resources started. However, sex work is still the oldest profession because sex work inherently means it's work. You're doing it in exchange for something else. Whereas when gynecology started, it wasn't people doing gynecology only in order to get resources. People were doing gynecology as a community service to help other members of their community stay alive during childbirth and to help children come into this world safely and healthily. It didn't start as a form of work in exchange for resources. It started as community aid, whereas sex work started as exchange for resources. And that is why we call sex work the oldest profession. And yeah, sometimes I do think that if we lived in a socialist utopia, I would still be fucking some powerful guy to get something that I wanted. And I think that would definitely still occur no matter what system we had set up. I think it would be impossible to have a society without any hierarchies at all. It's obviously idealistic and utopian and a desire to have a society without hierarchies, but I think due to human nature, I don't know if we'll ever achieve that. And whenever there is hierarchies in society, there's always going to be people from a lower hierarchy who want something from a higher hierarchy. And sex is something that people always want. Sex will always be a tool to get something from a higher hierarchy that you need. So I think it will always exist. Does your job come with a lot of beauty work or maintenance? And how do you feel about it? It doesn't really. In my opinion, my job doesn't come with any more beauty maintenance than what is regularly expected out of me in the patriarchal society that we live in. I have always somewhat prioritized beauty maintenance, even when I have not been working in sex work. I've always been really interested in makeup. I've always wanted to have my hair nicely done, shaving regularly, things like that. The only things I started doing more often when I started doing in-person sex work was making sure that my nails were always done perfectly. I actually never used to do my nails, but last year in October, when I started getting back into doing in-person sex work, I started doing gel manicures regularly, and I love it. And I also shave more often because I have to for work. But those are the only two things that have changed for me. And for me, those feel like quite small things in the grand scheme of things. I think the discussion around beauty maintenance is really more about patriarchy as a whole and how women are expected to always have our beauty maintained and always look a certain way. And I don't think it's necessarily about just this job, especially because men have all different sorts of tastes. Like there's plenty of sex workers who don't shave at all because there's a lot of men who are into that, or sex workers who don't wear makeup because they don't feel that they need to for bookings, and there's men who like a more natural look, things like this. Have you considered making a book about your opinion on your job, like an autobiography? Yes. I would really love to write an autobiography or a memoir, and I'll probably have to do that when I leave this industry or when I'm like 60 and most of my clients are dead. Because I have some really amazing stories from being in this line of work, and I have started writing many of them. I am a good writer. I have always enjoyed writing, and I have really enjoyed writing about my experiences. And I wish I could share them publicly. I've shared them with friends and gotten really great feedback. But because of client discretion, I cannot share these stories publicly. But one day I would really like to in a book form. So who knows what will happen. How often do you take time off from your work to avoid burnout? So I will take at least a week off of working every single month for my period. It is possible for me to work on my period. If you don't know, we use things called menstrual sponges, or soft tampons is another name for them. They're essentially little sponges that you put inside of your vagina, and they absorb the blood and enable you to have penetrative sex with the other person not noticing anything. No blood comes out. They don't notice any difference in sensation. So I can work on my period with those. However, during my period and the couple days before my period, I feel very low energy, very low mood. I'm easily irritable. And during this time, I really just prefer to take time to myself and to rest and not push myself to work. I do occasionally take bookings during this time if it's like a big one-off booking that I don't want to miss. I have pushed myself to work on my period, or when I'm PMSing really badly. I can do it, but I prefer not to. So that's one thing I do to avoid burnout. But I have actually been feeling burnt out in the last couple weeks because I did a work trip to London, and I pushed myself a lot while I was there and put a lot of mental pressure on myself to reach certain arbitrary levels of success. That is something I struggle with a lot. I have been speaking with my therapist recently about how, because of the way I was raised, I have a very black and white view of success versus failure. And I will often say to myself that, oh, I need to do this and this in order to be successful. I just make these things up in my head. And then if I don't reach them, I feel like a failure, which creates a lot of mental stress on myself. So that has been putting a lot of stress on me recently and caused me to be a little bit burnt out. But I just took it easy for a couple of weeks. I didn't have a ton of bookings anyway. And my other work, like my OnlyFans and my social media, is quite flexible where I can take time off if I really need to. That's one thing I like about all of the work I do in general is that I'm my own boss and that it's flexible. So I can always take a day off or turn things down if I want to. So, yeah, so far, I feel like I've mostly been able to have a good balance of work and rest. Do you have any suggestions on how to spice things up in the bedroom? My biggest suggestion is to really just communicate about your fantasies. And this could mean talking to each other directly about your fantasies, talking to each other about what you masturbate to. Do you imagine certain things when you masturbate? What type of porn do you masturbate to? Do you read erotic stories when you masturbate? And sharing those things directly with your partner. I also recommend taking one of those like BDSM or kink tests. There's a few of them online. They essentially give you a list, a very extensive list of different kinks and things to do in the bedroom. And you can check off how interested you are in certain things. And then your partner will also fill out the quiz and it will spit out results and it will show you only the things that both of you are interested in. And that can be a really great way to discover things that both of you are interested in, but might not have talked about before. If you just Google like kink or BDSM couples quiz, a few different ones will pop up and you can look through them and see which one you might prefer. And the last question I'm going to answer today is, have you ever experienced sexual dysfunction? For example, vaginismus or vulvodynia? Yes, I have. I had vulvodynia twice in my life. For those of you that don't know, vulvodynia is a condition where your vagina hurts a lot and nobody can tell you why or how to fix it. So I had the type of vulvodynia where the bottom part at the entrance of my vagina was incredibly painful and sensitive. The skin would easily crack there. It was so painful, I could not have any penetrative sex. I couldn't even put in a tampon, and I struggled with that for about 6 months. It was really difficult and really awful, and one of the most difficult things about it is that there is no cure for it, right? I had to go to 4 different doctors to even get a diagnosis because some doctors don't know what vulvodynia is. A lot of them just assumed it was something else. And once I finally got my diagnosis, my doctor said to me, we basically just have to try a bunch of different things. You just have to keep on throwing different treatments at it until you hopefully find something that works. And some people with vulvodynia never find something that works. The most extreme treatment for it is surgery to literally cut out the piece of skin that is causing you pain. And even that does not have a 100% success rate. The vulvodynia can spread to other tissue. Thankfully, I did not have it for too long. I think I had it for about 6 months. And what finally cured me of it was acupuncture. And it did reoccur about 2 years after the first time I had it. It came back, but because I knew what to do, essentially, I only had it for about a month the second time because I just went back to my acupuncturist. I think it's really a shame that this is not talked about because a lot of women struggle with vaginismus or vulvodynia. And I didn't know what it was. I had never heard of it until it happened to me. So if you have it, please know that you are not alone. And if you don't have it, I recommend looking into it. It is such a shame that studies around it are so underfunded. There's no cure for it. And I also actually did a film with Erica Lust called Outer Course that was about this topic. It was a porn film about a porn actress who had vulvodynia and couldn't do any penetrative sex. It was directed by Ali Kerr, who was one of my favorite directors to ever work with. She was so great. And when the team reached out to me about this film with this script, I was so elated because it was such a personal thing for me, having gone through having vulvodynia. The team didn't know that I used to have vulvodynia, so it really felt like kismet that I was able to work on this film after having this personal experience and be able to spread awareness about this issue through a hot porn film. So I'm going to end it with that. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to The Whore's Bedroom. As I mentioned in my previous episodes, I'm doing new episodes every other Sunday now, so every other week. And I'm going to start soon with interviews. I'm not sure if my first interview will be the next episode or if it's going to come later in November, but I'm starting to get organized with bringing guests onto the show. And I am so, so excited about the people who I'm already speaking about having on the show. I can't wait for you guys to hear from them. So, my name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore, and thank you for joining me in my bedroom.